Greetings everyone, Francis Fernando here. You know what my mantra is. My mantra in real estate, or my mantra on content creation is jump right into it. We are in an environment today where content is so abundant. I know people say content is king. I believe content is abundant. And for me to take and utilize your precious time, I better darn well be giving you value. So I like to jump right into my content. I have a voice in real estate because I have managed over $40 million worth of real estate assets. I've managed over 10,000 tenants, managing communications, managing renovations, managing making people millionaires in real estate. And I feel qualified to be able to share my valuable pieces of experience with you. So without further ado, today's session, today's episode is about the best ways to ensure that your tenants are paying their rent. Again, the best ways to make sure that your tenants are paying their rent. So I would like to start off by saying, what is the worst form of communications from a tenant? What is the worst thing that could happen with a tenant? Here's what it is. When a tenant stops communicating with you, when a tenant breaks down the barriers of communication and or what was open communication and just suddenly goes dark on you, that is the worst form of communication, because you as a landlord, you as a property owner have no idea what's going on. You don't know if you're going to collect your rent, you don't know if the property is being destroyed, and you don't know what your future perspectives of getting the unit back are. So when a tenant goes quote unquote dark from a communication standpoint, that is the worst feeling, that is the worst thing to happen. So I just want to share a quick story as it pertains to communication. I have a long-standing tenant that I own a single-family home. It's a lady who rents this single-family home. Been a long-term tenant. She's an amazing tenant. 6+ years as a tenant. And just recently I had this idea, because my mantra as it pertains to real estate, I've got many mantras, but my mantra as it pertains to real estate is hashtag how much will I make? In other words, if I'm going to get into a real estate transaction, how much ultimately will I make? I want that to become the mantra for you when you get into real estate, is hashtag how much will you make? Figure out exactly how much you will make. I digress. Let me get back onto my story. So my intent was to raise the rent of this long-standing tenant of mine, 6+ years, single-family home, excellent tenant, excellent relationship between me and her. So my intent was to raise the rent significantly, way above market value. So I literally wanted to go almost double market value, because again, quote unquote, not quote unquote, hashtag how much will I make? So I proposed to her a solution of introducing a roommate into the situation. So basically allowing her to have a roommate in the house. And so the solution I came up with was a win-win. I literally doubled my rent. Not exactly doubled my rent, but I doubled the market rent. But in essence, she gets a reduction on rent because she's paying 50% because she's sharing the rent. The point of what I'm trying to make here is that I communicated with her excellently. And I'm going to break down exactly how I went through it. But I communicated with her, and I gave her the support and reassurance that if this system didn't work, in other words, she was giving up a certain level of privacy for the benefit of paying less in rent, and the fact that I was going to lock her rent in for a significant period of time, more than a year. But my assurance to her was that if this did not work out from the standpoint of the privacy becoming an issue with her sharing the home with an unknown person, or what would be an unknown person, that I would support her in the next term of the lease renewal, that we would not go through that path and we would not renew that relationship again. So let me break it down. I got the breakdown of what I did from a communication standpoint. So being an engineer that I am, I have this design that I have come up with for communicating, because in order to collect maximum rent, in order to make sure that your tenants are paying their rent on time, the key factor is communication. Making sure that the communication is top notch. That is factor number one. There are results proven, and there are results that I have proven in my own internal office when I ran a property management company for close to 15 years, that when our communication was top notch, when my manager that was responsible for the communication with the tenants was top notch and on par and above par, then our collection abilities was that much greater. So let me break down the 4 steps to communicating effectively with tenants. Number 1, identify. You want to identify what the problem is and address the problem and only the problem. Too many times we start speaking about a problem or addressing a solution with a tenant, and we start talking about other factors. So for example, if we are discussing April rent, then we are discussing simply April rent. We are not going to confuse our communication with maintenance and all kinds of other, or deferred maintenance or anything else. So we are strictly focused on April rent. When I was communicating with my tenant about the introduction of the plan of a roommate, my communication was strictly for that. Here's what my intent is. Here's how it's going to benefit you. Here's how it's going to benefit me. There's no hiding. Here's how it's going to benefit me. Here are my reassurances, and here are the mechanics of how it's going to work. So really sticking to the point at hand and addressing one problem at a time. Number 2 is execute. So number 1 was identify the problem. Number 2 is execute a solution. Execute a clear-cut solution that is driven directly to the problem. So you are putting an execution strategy that is strictly tied to the problem. And number 3 is measure. You want to measure the success of your execution strategy. So in other words, is your execution strategy really helping with the solution? So in the case of my tenant, where I was introducing the roommate situation, I was measuring, and I was measuring the effectiveness of introducing a roommate into the mix there. Number 1 was her ability to communicate and work and live with another tenant working. Was the logistics around making sure that the property was able to accommodate multiple people sharing a kitchen, parking, all that, was that all facilitated from my end? So I wanted to make sure from a measuring the relative happiness, the relative, cash flow. Yes, I was literally doubling my market rent, but was I also increasing my expenses equally? So it's a measure of the execution strategy that is so critical. And quite honestly, many times we are going to make decisions that's not always spot on. And if it's not spot on, how are we tweaking this and tweaking our execution strategy so that it is as spot on as possible? Now, we might also have phased solutions. So in other words, we might not have a full-scale solution, And if we don't have a full-scale execution solution, then we're communicating partial solutions. So we're measuring that partial solution. Phase 1, we're going to do this. Phase 2, we're going to do that. So that's really important as well. Step number 4 is supporting that decision, supporting that execution strategy. Do we have the infrastructure to be able to solve the solution here, or to execute on the solution? A quick example is, imagine you're a prospective landlord and you are busy. You've got a full-time job, which is something that I always prescribe, is have a full-time job, invest in real estate as a path towards wealth. As you know, I like digressing. I actually wrote a book called Job plus Real Estate Equals Wealth. Have a job, full-time job, invest in real estate as a path towards wealth. Again, I digress. Let me get back onto focus here. So we're talking about supporting your communication strategy and supporting your execution strategy and your decision. When you're supporting it, make sure you undo all the possible roadblocks. So for example, let's assume you're a full-time employee and you're a prospective real estate investor, and you're thinking about investing in real estate and buying a building. Your biggest hindrance has been, I'm not super comfortable dealing with tenants. How do you overcome that? And you got to think through the burdens and the obstacles that you might face. One obstacle could be, you could be working full-time in a meeting, traveling all over the place, but your tenant might have an emergency situation that occurs. If this happens, and this is a consistent occurrence, no matter how good your communication is, no matter how effective your execution strategy is, no matter how you could be communicating at 110%, if you're constantly going to be behind the 8 ball on taking care of his or her needs, then you're coming to the party at a disadvantage, because you are always confessing to not taking care of a solution. So you want to fix the roadblocks. So you want a support infrastructure that allows you to operate at maximum communication. And if that means that you have someone else communicating for you, if that means that you have a call center that's taking these calls and texting you issues, if that means your maintenance person is going to take the initial call so that there's always someone effectively communicating with your tenants, then so be it. But make sure you design that. So without further ado, we're sort of entering into the next phase of this, content creation on this episode, which is our rapid fire. This is where I ask 3 questions that may have come up in your mind as I was presenting my content here, and I give you full-scale answers to those questions. So without further ado, question number 1. Francis, what is the best way to communicate with a tenant? My answer to that is being open and proactive. Being open and proactive. Every time we are open to a situation and we are proactively communicating as opposed to reactively communicating, then we're that much better off. Tenants are that much more forgiving when you are proactively letting them know that, hey, I believe that the furnace is going to fail this summer. I just want to let you know. If it does, I want you to communicate that with me immediately. And when you do, here's the solution that I'm going to place. So you're open, but you're also proactively letting them know about a potential solution problem. And once in a while, I talked about as a bonus, once in a while, surprise your tenants. Surprise your tenants. I do this very often as, a tenant renews their lease, and 2 weeks after their renewal, I'll drop off a gift Sometimes the gift is a mutually beneficial gift. It could be a gift that makes them super happy, but it also enhances the value of the asset, my asset. So I'll drop off a gift and I'll say, hey, in a week's time, we're going to have a technician come by and install that new faucet in for you, because I know that was a bone of contention with you, that, you know, your faucet was a little old. So it's surprising them once in a while. Question number 2 is, when you need to lay down the law and the iron fist, when you need to lay down the law and the iron fist with a tenant, how do you do that? So the answer to that is, you know, as I mentioned to you, I've managed over tens of thousands of tenants. And what I have found consistently works is separating your emotion with the tenant and really focusing on a system. So if you have systematized what you do to a process, so when you are doing an eviction, you're following a process. When you are doing a tenant renewal, you have a process. When you're doing your collections, you have a process. So your tenants start respecting your process. When they respect your process, they separate the emotion. You'll be amazed how smart people are. They separate the emotion from the process, and they understand that, you know, so be it. That has to be done, because that's the process of how you and we deliver them excellent housing. Number 3 is, if I have held back on investing in real estate due to my fear of dealing with tenants, what advice do you have? First of all, I will tell you, this is a legitimate fear. You know, this is a legitimate fear. There's many people that have this. So if this is a fear and concern of yours, don't beat yourself up too much, because this is a legitimate fear that many people have. My suggestion or my inclination to believe is that if this is a fear as it pertains to real estate investing, it is quite possibly a fear for many other aspects of your life too. I would suspect that it's a fear of public speaking. If you were asked to speak at an event at your company, if you were asked to host a meeting or run a presentation at your office, and you had to get up and speak, I would suspect that would be a daunting task for you. I would suspect that if you were given a leadership role and you were to, you know, run multiple projects and make sure people are working to the same sheet of music, I suspect that would be a daunting moment for you as well. So my piece of advice is, why don't we work together? Why don't you work towards confronting that fear? I mean, I'm going to speak, this is near and dear to me because I'm an engineer by education. And as you know, engineers aren't the best communicators in the world. I myself was not an excellent communicator, but I confronted my fear. And I'll tell you, it has done me wonders. It has really opened up the door to many things. It's really helped me in the world of real estate investing, creating wealth for myself and my family. And it's really changed the path of my life. So I would suspect that it's probably important to confront that fear. It may be holding you back on real estate investing today, but I suspect it's holding you back on many other aspects of your life. So my offer to you is, if this is of concern to you, again, this is near and dear to me. If this is of concern to you, reach out to me. Just reach out to me. Mention this video and let me know that you saw this video and I made an offer of reaching out. I'd love to help you with communication. Again, this has got nothing to do with real estate investing. It's got to do with communicating and communicating effectively. I would love to help you with that. I hope this video was of value. I know it was, and I hope that you will take great value from this. And happy real estate investing. Hashtag, how much will I make? I want that to be your mantra. Please, please learn the effectiveness of doing analysis before you buy a property so that you can ultimately know how much you're going to make, and communicate at 150%, and you will see how that will change your life. Take care. Thank you so much.